I hear a lot from members of the media, and particularly I heard this from one of the editorial writers at the Post-Dispatch, that public officials have all the power behind them to influence people, and they must be held to a high standard of accountability. And I agree with that we should be held to a high standard of accountability in what we do. But I think the media also has a standard of accountability. They're the ones that filter what happens, condense it into a short article, send it out to the public and say, here's what happened. And they have a responsibility to report accurately and honestly too. Just as we have a responsibility to be open and transparent, comply with the Sunshine Laws. I always file suits and make comments about the Sunshine Law. We believe that public officials should be accountable. Part of this lawsuit against Governor Nixon is that he withheld $172 million and there's no data for it. There's no accountability. So I thought I was exercising my responsibility. But I think the media has a similar situation. Now, when they say that Mr. Schweich wants the court and public to believe his budget is more important than helping a city rebuild from one of the worst natural disasters in our state's history, that is blatant dishonesty. It is corrupt, it is dishonest, it is libelous, it is false, and is a tremendous disservice to the people of Missouri who have to read junk like that, when the Post-Dispatch knows darn well, just reading the lawsuit, that is not what this lawsuit's about. My budget is a tiny little piece of it. Helps me get standing. We would have done a great comparative audit. We would have helped save the state millions of dollars, but it pales by comparison to the $99 million in student loans that are not being given out right now. It pales by comparison to all the other withholds that occur, and that's why I filed the lawsuit. Now, why would they write something like this? Well, I have a pretty long history with this newspaper. When I was in Afghanistan, I got into them pretty heavily with them. There was a story that came out when we formed the public-private partnership for justice reform in Afghanistan. This is where we get rich American lawyers to give money to poor Afghan women, prosecutors and judges and courts. They wrote a harsh article about it, saying it was more outsourcing of government functions, and also saying that the counter-narcotics program was largely unsuccessful. In fact, the program we just put into place reduced drugs in Afghanistan by 19% in the first year. I called them on it. I said, what do you mean largely unsuccessful? I learned that the article that was originally submitted didn't say that. It was an editor who'd never been to Afghanistan that put that in there. So I got into it with him. I said, there's some integrity required here. If you're going to say it's largely unsuccessful, there better be some backup for that. There was no backup. It was inserted by an editor and not part of the story that was originally submitted. We had a similar situation on October 25th, 2010. Post-Dispatch endorsed my opponent, Susan Monte, which they're perfectly entitled to do. Many newspapers endorsed Susan Monte for auditor, and I had no quarrel with their reasoning. They thought she was an accountant and I wasn't, and there were some things that set us apart. I thought it would be good to have a person with legal and prosecutorial experience. They didn't. I'm fine with that. I've written for the New York Times, I've written for the Washington Post, I had press conferences in Kabul with media organizations from Pakistan, India, Afghanistan, all the tabloids of the UK. I like what they say sometimes, I don't like what they say sometimes, but it doesn't bother me. I've never had an issue with it. In this case, I met with the editorial board of the Post-Dispatch, and they said, we think you really just run against Claire McCaskill. We think you don't really want to be an auditor, and that's why we don't like you. And I said, I will give you my word that I will not run against Claire McCaskill in 2012. I like the idea of being auditor. I want to be auditor. They said, how do we know that? I said, well, first of all, my wife would probably divorce me if I ran into another campaign right after having finished one. They laughed and said, that's reasonable. I said, second of all, I like rooting out fraud, waste, abuse, and corruption. I did it at the UN. I did it at the Law Enforcement Division of the State Department. I did it in Afghanistan. I did it at Waco. Now I want to do it here. And I like the idea of this job. It's a fun job. It's a good job. And I'm not going to run against Claire McCaskill. Read the editorial that came out. They said, by the way, they said, we accept that. They said overtly, we accept that. And then the article came out and said, don't vote for Monty because all Schweich really wants to do is run against Claire McCaskill. Completely, totally dishonest. And they knew it, and they wrote it. Now let's keep going. There was an article came out on February 20th, 2011, where they said that one of my associates worked only 1 hour in order to get in under the retirement system. We provided the data showing, no, she had worked quite a bit more than that and was an active part of my transition team. Article came out, right at the front, 1 hour to get to retirement. Later in the back, you could see something been tacked on saying we claimed she'd work longer. Well, we provided the data, but they didn't want to rewrite the story. April 28th, 2011, I recused myself from the Peter Kinder audit because he had been a major contributor to my campaign. I actually thought I might even get a little bit of good press for that because I'm the first auditor ever to recuse himself like that from a major contributor when he's the subject of financial allegations of financial impropriety. Instead, the editorial came out saying I'm characterizing it, but basically said this is the problem. Schweich can't do the audit. What's wrong with him? So I got criticized for recusing myself when I had a conflict of interest, even though other auditors have campaigned with people who they're auditing and didn't recuse themselves. I did the right thing. There's a negative thing. And I won't even go into all the stories about Peter Kinder that they're writing when I've had reporters from the Post-Dispatch sit down and tell me about major indiscretions of Democrats and asked if I was going to bring those up. And I said, I don't think they're relevant. I don't like talking about them. Of course, they were never published. In May 6th, there was an article in the Post-Dispatch. I just activated the rapid response team for the first time. We formed a rapid response. There's a lot of concerns that the auditor gets in late. The auditor gets in and looks at the data when it's already been destroyed, when things have been rewritten or revamped. So we formed a rapid response team. I hired Daryl Moore, a great prosecutor, and I activated because there have been allegations that at a particular school in the city of St. Louis, attendance figures had been deliberately inflated. And I issued a press release. I didn't mention the name of the school. I didn't mention the name of the accusers. I didn't mention the name of the accused. I simply said it was an allegation that came to our attention and we're activating. The Post-Dispatch then dug around, called their people, and published the names of the accusers, published the name of the schools, published everything, and then published an editorial criticizing me for violating standards of decency by exposing these people to harm before anything had been proven. Now, we sat on the phone with 2 hours with their editorial board, me for an hour and then Daryl Moore for an hour, explaining this is very common. Even under the higher standards of prosecutors, it's perfectly acceptable to issue a general press release saying, here's what we're looking at. And you can even, under the laws of prosecutors, you can even state the names, but we decided not to do that. We redacted all the names and tried to protect the privacy. They exposed the names and then ran an article criticizing our paper. And I've gotten into it with them on all of these. So this gives you an idea of why we're moving down this road. Then today, the article in the Post-Dispatch says, I sued because I'm mad about my own budget and don't care about the people of Joplin. I want to ask some questions. Has Gilbert Bylon or Tony Messenger from the editorial board been down to Joplin? Because I have. I went down to Joplin. My brother-in-law's from there. I went to his brother's temporary new dentist's office to see how he was doing. I had lunch with his mother. I met with Nick Myers, an accountant I know down there who lost everything, to see how he was doing. I gave a private donation, which I wasn't going to talk about, to an aggrieved family I just met down there. It was so hurting. I handed them out some money because I just felt bad for them. Then I went down and gave them advice on how to account for disasters, which got a glowing editorial in the Joplin Globe. And then you might see the Post-Dispatch over the weekend published a quote from Bill White, the state rep from Joplin, saying that there's no need to cut higher education for debris removal in Joplin. So I had support there too. That was not cited in the article. I care about Joplin. I've got extended family down there. I've been down there. I've donated. I've given them accounting advice. I've met with the people. I've expressed my empathy and sympathy for them. And for them to write an article saying I don't care about them is corrupt, dishonest, and a total disservice to the people of Missouri, whom I represent and who I intend to be a good auditor for. Now, what I'm asking for is something very simple, a retraction and an apology. What they've done is so far beyond the line of reality that they need to retract and apologize. Now, the media has a lot of power, and if wielded corruptly, as occurred here, it's a disservice to the people of Missouri and those like me who have chosen the rigors of public service. What I care about is enforcing the Constitution and protecting all these aggrieved parties. My office is a minor player in all this. And I think it's the duty of the media to stop wielding personal vendettas for political reasons or because I've caught them on previous errors or whatever it is, and start reporting the truth. Kansas City Star had a very different view of this situation. The state reps have a very different view of the situation. At least there should be some balance when something like this comes out. But to suggest that I would sacrifice the people of Joplin for my own budget, when anybody reads the lawsuit knows that has nothing to do with it, is beyond the pale. I have never one time publicly criticized a media organization. I've dealt with the most crazy, tried dealing with the media in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and all those tabloids in the UK, even the Washington Post and New York Times, which are frequently accused of being biased in one way or the other. You know, I let it roll off. I'm okay. I haven't agreed with everything you all have said, some of you in this room. But you know what? It's part of the job, and you can't be too thin-skinned. But when somebody comes out there with such a scandalously lying argument, such a completely false editorial, and misleads the people about what their state auditor is up to, I have to say something about it. And so that's why I called the press release today. That's why I raised this. I'm filing this lawsuit to get clarity on what the Constitution of Missouri allows, to establish what the separation of powers is and the authority of the government and the governor, and also because no one else is looking out for all these people that are affected by the $172 million, except for me. That's why I did it. Thank you all very much for coming. I very much appreciate your time and effort, and I hope to be working with you